Thanks so much. I'm Aydiner. I'm an assistant professor and program chair of Homeland Security at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Today, we want to share our research with my dear colleague, Erin Ryder, on the forced migration journey of highly educated women navigating trauma and temporary hardships. If you like, we can first start with introducing ourselves. Erin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you for attending. I work at Nevada State College in Nevada in the United States, and I'm currently the Assistant Director of Faculty Development and Diversity, and I'm a sociologist by training.
Perfect. I can briefly show our structure outline. We will first talk our published works. I'm working with Erin almost 4 years. And we published some articles. We also had in a film project together. So after that, I will talk about briefly about recent study and its impact on women. And then Erin will talk about literature review, how it represented in the literature. We will share information about how we collected data in our methods section. And then we will share together results and discuss about that. We will complete and talk about our recent exciting film and future projects. As I said, we are working with Erin for almost 4 years, and we published good articles. We attended in conferences about the recent Turkish forced migration from Turkey to Europe and United States. We first published in International Journal of Sociology and Social Policy on migration policies and practices at job market participation of highly educated Turks in the United States, Canada, and Europe. It was a comparative study, and we compared how policies approach to newcomers change depend on the country they arrive in this study. And in our recent study, we focus on the United States field and these populations experience specifically in the United States. Since it's a huge country and we collected data from almost all around the country, from the California to Florida. So in this study also published, it's open source, and I will share these after my presentation on chat. You can find this study in open source. It's published in International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. And our recent exciting project is our documentary film. It's already awarded and had some grants from different festivals and accepted different festivals. We are still waiting responses from 10 more festivals. Hopefully we will hear, we are expecting to hear good news about our film. And finally, I will talk about that project. Okay, first I can talk about our context. As you know, immigrants are often pressed to show how they will contribute to a host country, thus proving through their conditions of entry and human capital whether they will be perceived as an asset or burden. And this is juxtaposed with the host country's institutions offering an improved quality of life, mainly through employment. And employment is a very important process, very important start point for all immigrants. Seeking employment is often a key factor to be economically assimilated. And in the case of highly educated Turkish migrants, the opportunity to reclaim their previous professional and quality of life statuses, because they already lost them after July 15 coup-like events. Based on qualitative research, we have examined the experiences of highly educated Turkish people, 42 people, in the recently forced migration population, following events including terrorism and coup-like events on July 15, 2016. Turkey experienced the highest forced migration in her history, With exiled Turkish migrants, the first aspect of their migration prompts them to seek a host country that provides safety. And they are also driven to transfer their educational degrees and professional credentials. And it was also a very hard process, a tough process for them. However, changing careers to become educated and certified in new fields takes time and resources, contributing to a fluctuating economic status and loss of well-being. Once this is regained, when they accomplished and had an employment, their economic situation is improved, but there is still the lost time from the immigration and transfer period. Thus, the process has positive and negative components, but understanding this nuanced process provides opportunities for policy reform that can shorten the time of re-education, increase the employability, and support well-being. So our results also can be applied to men. Okay, let's talk about migration from Turkey to the United States. As you can see, it's not a close country, it's not a neighboring country for Turkey. And migrating here, moving to the United States is a hard task because it's also, not easy to find enough capital. When you see the currency difference between Turkey and the United States today, it was around 1 to 4, 1 to 5 until 2005. But until 2006, it started to increase, and now it's almost $1 is 20 Turkish dollars. So it's also economically is not a easy task to move from Turkey to the United States. Immigrants, I can first start with the historical approach and talk a little bit about the large migration of Turks to the United States and other countries. Immigrants, especially forced ones, generally prefer neighboring countries to migrate due to main reasons such as affordability, proximity, and similarity to their origin states. Moving too far away from their origin country, as you can see from the map, requires more economic, social, and cultural capital. In the case of modern Turkey, large group of Turkish migrants have taken residence within Europe mainly for economic reasons and family reunification in the 1960s. Turks contribute to the highest immigrant population with more than 5 million in Europe now, especially in Germany and Netherlands. Due to immigration laws, Turkish immigrants to the United States were a smaller migration population, but were more educated, with around 23,000 in the same period in 1960s. Following World War II, the United States attracted many professionals with its rise in science and technology. Highly skilled and educated Turks, including doctors, engineers, and academics, also took their place in this brain drain in the United States until the 1980s and increased the population up to 50,000. Between the 1980s and 2010, the Turkish population reached close to 200,000 based on the United States Census data. During this period, Turkey faced a military coup and the Kurdish conflict. As a result, Kurdish origin Turks and other less educated and semi-skilled Turks migrated to the United States due to political unrest and economic reasons. Okay, over 250,000 Turks emigrated in 2017 after the coup-like events on July 15, 2016 in Turkey. There was a systematic isolation of opposing people to Erdogan's regime, and Turkey faced with her highest immigration pattern. So what happened? 42%, we've seen 42% increase from 2016 to 2017 in asylum applications. Asylum applications worldwide increased by 10,000 to over 33,000 just in 2017 from the Turkish population. The number of Turkish immigrants obtaining lawful permanent resident status in the United States was approximately 5,000 yearly from 2017 to 2021. However, the number of individuals granted asylum affirmatively was only 15 in 2017. Asylum rates increased to 475 in 2018 and 1,714 in 2019 and almost 1,600 in 2020. The Turkish population is estimated to be around 350,000 in the United States currently, including increased unauthorized arrivals, especially through the El Paso, Texas entryway. Maybe you've heard about that on news. That entrance also was a popular gate for the recent unlawful migration from Turkey, and it has reached more than 10,000 Turkish nationals in 2022. The main reason for these professionals' migration was opposition to the ruling party. Almost all of them were highly educated, skilled, and legal migrants. Professionals included judges, teachers, doctors, journalists, police officers, ministry officials, and military career officers, including cadets and retired officers. If they were not arrested, most of them were denied passports, disqualified, humiliated, and stamped in the country. This atmosphere has forced many to leave the country through legal or illegal means to Europe and North America. Many of them were fluent in English and familiar with life in the United States due to having educational and occupational experience prior to the 2016 events. However, despite some familiarity with the United States, most of them had never envisioned living in another country because their identity and loyalty were centered on serving their homeland. Many of these displaced professionals have been granted special visas, green cards, asylum, or refugee statuses. Managing the migration process and providing suitable jobs for this talented immigrant group is therefore a challenge. And now we can talk about why we are doing this study, purpose of our research. Erin, would you like to continue?
Yes, so Cihan and I have been working on a fast track integration model, and this is to help influence policy reforms to figure out how to better, for Turkish migrants and other migrants, to better navigate the re-education and re-credential experiences, and to increase employability and to further their well-being. And what is unique about this professional labor group, and Cihan kind of mentioned this already, is that they do occupy a higher status. And this is through their professional skills and their employment. And so with economic integration, that presumes that they will have an easier transition in order to regain their status and to continue their professional skill sets. However, looking at the migration experiences, especially the forced aspect and the urgency, has complicated that higher human capital. So having stability through the migration process and being able to transition into either a continued career line or a new career line has been compromised in the immigration experience. So these are kind of the significant aspects of looking at this particular population, and we're really looking at a group that has this higher human capital, but also has these forced conditions that undermine that. Okay, so in the literature review, I think this is really important when we were looking at economic integration to really look at the unique experiences of Turkish migrants and how they were able to transition into a new country and continue their line of work and to have economic stability. And what is important is that for Turkish migrants, many of them had some positive factors that contributed to securing their economic stability in the United States. And some of these include English fluency, of course, their higher human capital, their social and professional networks. All these were contributing in a positive way. However, there were some that were contributing in a negative way, and the main one is trauma. So trauma in the forced conditions of migration, and then learning the new systems and gaining some kind of cultural familiarity and adjusting to a new country. And some of them had experience already with the United States, and that helped in that process. Looking at the barriers to economic integration, there are several things that undermine the transition period that many individuals in our study experienced. And one has been associated with the glass gate effect. So there's a concept called glass gate, which looks at Western countries lowering the value of foreign credentials. So not positioning foreign credentials as high as credentials within the native country. So looking at the US particularly. The foreign credential recognition process in Western countries has oftentimes been very limited. It is a lengthy process, and a lot of times, especially for high skilled positions, so particular work disciplines and fields, has made that very difficult to have that credentials being transferred. And then additionally, in the time period between trying to have the credentials transferred, many migrants were taking on new jobs or taking on temporary jobs. And so we saw an occupational mismatch that was also contributing to kind of undermining any kind of economic stability or economic integration. This lowered the hiring chances. This also contributed to some other negative factors. So for some migrants, when they were engaging in this transfer of either skills or changing careers. So there's kind of two aspects here, either continuing with their current field and waiting for that transfer process to happen, or going into an entirely new field. There was that time frame, that temporary time frame, in which they were undermined by lower skilled work, and then also lower wages. So many individuals ended up taking on secondary sector jobs that were lower than their professional skill sets. So they were underemployed and they were underpaid. And then this also contributed to a fluctuating economic status and well-being. And one thing that we're looking at to go kind of further, and this hasn't been addressed fully in the literature as much yet, is what is that long-term earnings gap? So for many of the individuals in our study, many of them eventually reached back to kind of regaining their status and having economic stability. But there was that 1 to 2 year time frame in which there was an earnings gap. And so if we think about that, what does that do in terms of their long-term economic resources and going into retirement at some point? And then also looking at occupational commitment, because many individuals in our study changed career fields. And so what we weren't able to look at yet is looking at what led to how they picked their new career field. We have some ideas already that were highlighted by our participants. And then also trying to figure out, what does that mean for long-term occupational commitment? So that could mean that their first career line was where they had passion, and the second one being more instrumental in just trying to regain their former professional status. And so we're looking into that a little bit more. But all of these factors end up jeopardizing some of the economic integration and stability. But at the same time, we're also looking at aspects in which they had, again, resources that were beneficial. So again, the high human capital, the ability to rely on social networks and professional networks, and just having a strong sense of motivation to regain their former livelihood.
So how we collect the data? Maybe I can first start with this flyer. We created a flyer and shared with our network. Since I'm also a Turkish comer to the United States, I'm affiliated with Turkish origin population. And we shared this flyer, and organically with snowball sampling, we found great interviewees. After our recruitment process with, for example, Tulip Human Right Center supported this research, and also they shared this research with their network. Also, we connected with Turkish Professionals USA group in LinkedIn. They also have many participants. After this process, reaching out these people, we started our interviews. These interviews was semi-structured interviews, and from New Jersey to Dallas, Houston, California, Florida, and Virginia, we collected data from 42 people, and 12 of them tracked from our first study published in 2021. These highly educated Turkish people were living in the United States. In our first comparative study, we interviewed 34 exiled Turkish people in 8 different countries, including 6 European countries, Canada, and the United States. Half of the respondents were from the United States, and these 12 people comes from there. Other than that, we also found 30 new people. And why these specific regions? Because they were living in historically highly Turkish populated areas still, more than 10,000 people. For example, in the United States, in the order of New Jersey, Dallas, Houston, California, Virginia, and Florida, these are the most populated Turkish origin people are living now, more than 10,000 people. And these newcomers also tracked previous historical places, and they're also living populated in these regions. The Turkish population increased between 15% to 50% from 2015 to 2020 in these selected cities. We focused on demographics, and we had 37 men and 5 women interviewees. Also, we filmed 2 women in our Exiled Hopes film study. I want to stress one important point about gender roles here. The context of our gender roles was important while collecting our data. When we look at these highly educated people, they are mostly dual earners in Turkey and also in the United States. So especially for women, it was a hard process because most of them could not continue their careers. And they also tried to find new ones while taking care of their home and children. So most of the time, if a woman does not have an easy transition job like doctors or more specific academical jobs, professors, they had to support their home and children first, and men started to looking for new opportunities, or they started to ways to continue their previous status or previous careers. Okay.
So in our research in this particular project, we found 3 significant themes that emerged. And so what we will do here is we'll highlight each theme, and then we'll go into what participants discussed in the interviews. And so the first one is the issues migrated with them. And we really found that there was this compounded trauma that really didn't get addressed or obviously resolved. And so if we think about the migration journey itself and the trauma that prompted fleeing, and then the migration journey while en route, and then also resettling into the United States, that there was trauma that continuously built in that process. And so there's this process of just building insecurities and building trauma. And then those kind of get compounded as they go. Turn it back over to Cihan.
we can share some specific examples. For example, one woman between the ages of 40, 45, she was a professional in Turkey. She's talking about the process after July 15, and she says, so after 2 months like this, the occurrence, she refers to July 15, 2016 coup-like events, happened. He was arrested, her husband was arrested. And after that, I went into a difficult process. It was the most difficult time in my professional life. I was going to my office every day. I kept my door locked most of the time, because I wasn't feeling well. I was crying, sometimes there were so many troubles that I was crying. I had 3 small children. When we look at another example, of course, there are many advantages of citizenship. In other words, there are many opportunities that countries provide to their own citizens. But on July 15th, it showed very clearly that countries can do the evilest to their citizens. I mean, people's own country could do the worst harm to its own citizens. That's why the concept of citizenship had a very serious concussion in my mind. And a final example, my husband too was exposed to great difficulties in a completely different country. At the same time, I had to support him for many years. My husband could not come here to the United States from Greece for 3.5 years. So one of the reasons why our integration here is so slow and troublesome is that my husband was going through another troublesome period there. When we can easily find out from these examples, these individuals, these women had compounded trauma, and they had hard time to deal with this process. They had to continue their careers. Also, some of them could have to support their husband. So their gender roles has changed, and they also had more responsibilities, and they needed more moral and more well-being support for their process. But most of them could not find them from external sources and could have to deal with them by themselves.
I wanted to add also to that, what Cihan was saying was that, so they were dealing with the emotional adjustment of their family, particularly their children, and dealing with separation, so that the roles that they had established within their family had been compromised. And then a lot of the burden was placed on them as they were trying to navigate this new migration route and journey, the trauma, and then the individual impacts to their family members. So for this next theme, in the migration route itself, many of our participants experienced short-term poverty. And so recall that, again, that they had this high human capital and likely economic savings, and many of those were depleted in the migration route itself. So the forced migration, the urgency to migrate ended up making for whatever economic resources they had built up. This wasn't planned, so it was just whatever that they already had, ended up meaning that many of them encountered short-term poverty. This was from the migration journey, and also adjusting to the United States and taking on some of those lower skilled jobs in order to make it, in the temporary kind of context to make sure that they could meet their economic needs.
I can also talk about examples for short-term poverty. First interview we shared with us. I mean, having an academic job, of course, would be very good, but I thought that I could easily find a job with a very small budget to support my family. But after coming here, things are not like that, because I came here as a tourist. The biggest disappointment was to learn that I'm not allowed to work on a tourist visa. Another example, renting a house was also difficult. We showed ourselves working there in that company. It's as if we were able to buy a house with that financial business letter, with that financial salary. Then we started to run that. We made good money for 2 months. Then the corona started. The tourists did not come. We went bankrupt. These findings, also these excerpts could be found in interviewees. They all shared their experiences with the poverty, since almost all of them had a good career and mid-level career or high-level, superior positions they've been. They had more difficult times after losing their jobs because most of them are working in specific places, and these could not be transferred easily to the new job opportunities in the United States, and they all experienced short-term or little long-term poverty until finding a proper job and having proper salary.
And then I would add too that the migration wasn't always streamlined, that oftentimes it was navigating one barrier after the other, and those ended up undermining again or taking away from any built up economic capital. So our third theme is filling the gap, overload. So the participants in our study were savvy in their ability to take on jobs in order to provide for their families, as they were also navigating the recredentialing process or becoming certified in a new field. And so many during that temporary time frame took on very low-skilled, low-wage jobs in order just to have a stream of income coming in. And they were able to tap into their social and cultural capital. So whether they were going to go the route of being recredentialed, or if they were going to seek out a new career, and many of them, in both of our studies, we found that many went into data science, that particular field, that they started to interact with other professionals, utilize organizations in order to find the best fit in order to regain their status as quickly as possible. And this also required, with those secondary sector jobs, taking on a lot of hours, dealing with, the difficult conditions, because again, they're professional, they were previously professionally employed, and then taking on jobs that were given very little status, very little support, difficult jobs working with the public. Also interacting as immigrants in a new context within the United States, and doing all this in order so that they could build up some kind of economic capital to provide during that temporary time frame. And sometimes we were looking at between 1 to 2 years that they were taking on these types of jobs.
We found many good examples about filling the gap and overload. One woman shared with us, when I came here, I thought that burning the diplomas, they were useless. Whomever I talk to says the same thing. My left brain is convinced to pursue the IT course, but my right brain says no. You have worked so much for psychology, you have spent years, and you should continue working on it. I told myself first I need to complete my education so that I can hold on to life here. Then I clung to education. I believed it would give me enough time because I was in a state of shock in 2016. I did not know what I wanted to do or what to do. So I used my PhD in this way to save some time. At the end of my PhD, I had decided that I was going to do, and I started acting toward that. Also, in our other samples, we found that many professionals worked many hard. I can share some examples from men, for example. One of the professors, postdoc professors, are giving more than 10 courses in the same term in 4 different colleges, because they are trying to protect their family. They are trying to stabilize their life again, and they don't want, especially their family experience, the trauma, hardship, what they experience in this process. So they worked very hard. In other example, one was talking about he worked for 3 years for a specific job He worked in this job in, I believe it was about the designing kitchen and bathrooms. He did a two-man's job for more than 3 years to reach again his previous status and previous life standards. So it was a hard process, and filling the gap and this overload created some health issues for some of the interviewees.
And I wanted to highlight with that theme as well is that, as that second interviewee talked about, was that there was this instrumental focus or this immediate need to gain economic resources. And so then that became the focal point and the motivation in order to provide, to regain livelihood, provide for their family, and then think about how they may have been also trying to manage emotional trauma during that. But really kind of focusing on economic integration first, which we found in the literature as well. Our conclusion highlighted 3 main factors. So, of course, higher human capital is important and allowed participants in our study to be able to navigate and lead to further transition of regaining some of their economic capital. But we found that they were not as stable as we thought. So many individuals, right as the migration journey began, lost the majority of their income, and then again had a hard time regaining their status in that temporary time frame of the first year or two as they were taking on those lower skill jobs. Second, as we mentioned with the trauma, is that it was compounded throughout the process. And so thinking of the long-term effects of that can be dire in terms of how to manage and how to develop resiliency and resolve around the trauma that was experienced. And then the third conclusion that we found that was interesting too is that although our participants were really successful at regaining their economic status, so even if there was that temporary delay, majority of them were able to regain professional positions and may have felt more stable and safe within the United States. There's also compromises to their sense of belonging and cultural familiarity. Cihan kind of mentioned this earlier, is that they did have a strong sense of loyalty to Turkey as their homeland. And so all of a sudden now adjusting and may be feeling that they can't return or can't regain that livelihood. Think about it also with occupational commitment, because if their first line of career in which they had a strong sense of their identity, if they were forced to then change to a different career, how do they develop that same level of occupational commitment and identity in their kind of economic sense as well?
I want to share 2 more examples about this. One says, I love America, but my sense of belonging to America, for example, my sense of belonging to Turkey is more. So I love Turkey more from my heart, but I love America because of the opportunities it gives me. I mean, it could be a conflict of interest. I mean, maybe. I mean, it's a conflict of interest because at heart, I don't like America much more. When I look at it from Turkey's perspective, it doesn't look very different to me in America. America is also cruel. Crime rates are high in America. There are injustices in America. I mean, America is not the perfect place to be called rosy, in my opinion. But because of the opportunities it presents to me right now, I love America. Other woman says, other than that, my thoughts about this place are that I came to the United States. In the end, I got an opportunity here. I'm raising my family here. I'm providing opportunities to my family here. I continue my life struggle here. For these reasons, I think I should be as useful as I can to the community here. I think I should be useful to not only Turkey, but to where I'm in the United States too. I want to do this not only so people can say that I'm doing it, but also for my own self-satisfaction and to myself feel better. So these examples also supported by our men interviewees. Most of them still have this loyalty, but their introducing themselves and describing their identity is not the same as they did before 2016 events. So being in the United States or other places provided them many things. They struggled a lot at first. Then they could reach their previous statuses, previous life standards. Also, their minds has developed. Their thoughts has developed, changed. So they don't define themselves as previously they did. And they have different experiences and more opportunities to become a better person. Most of them describe like that. So it's the end of our research, and I want to talk a little bit about our film. And our film, Exiled Hopes, is a documentary film, documentary academic research film, and it has already accomplished good festival ratings. It awarded as Outstanding Excellence from the Docs Without Borders International Film Festival. Also selected 6 more festivals. I've added 3 of them here. Ethnographic Film Paris, it's an academic film festival. Berlin Liftoff Film Festival, and also Global Network of Manchester has accepted our film to be shown on their venue. And we are still waiting responses from 10 festivals, and hopefully we will hear good news. In this film project, we had Erin Ryder, my dear colleague. She shared especially the interviewees' quotes who cannot voice themselves, still has, some hesitations sharing their views because of their, status in the United States, or their fear about their families, relatives in their homelands. They could not want to be under the spotlight. So their quotes shared by Erin, and also Erin talked about our research and how we created this structure to talk with these professionals, individuals in the film. Also, we had a board member of Blue Tulip Human Right Center, Melissa Page, in this interview talks. And we had more interviews with the professionals from different, living in the different regions of the country, from California to Virginia, Dallas to Houston, and Florida to the New York. In these cities, we met with these professionals and had at least 1 hour filming with them, and they shared their great experiences. Since they experiences are real, and since very powerful, strong, I believe it created good outcomes with the results of our audiences in festivals. In future, we are still, planning more studies on this. We already did a comparative study, but maybe when we visit some European countries, we can extend our study with new participants to compare our results with European countries, with newcomers. Also, we are planning to look at gender roles in our future studies. Erin, would you like to add something?
Yeah, so we'll we have a current study that we're looking at about women refugees, and then also we are looking at maybe a quantitative study as well, looking at the overall integration process, economic, cultural, and some of the other factors as well that contributes to the assimilation process.
Okay, so we are concluding our presentation, and I believe we have more time for questions and answers. If you have any question about this project or in general, we would like to hear that.
Sean, somebody asked how they could get a PDF of the presentation.
Okay, I can share on chat. I can prepare after our presentation. I can prepare it in PDF file and share on chat.
Anybody's willing to unmute themselves, you can ask a direct question or put one in the chat.
Yes, absolutely.
There's one that's asked from Sasha S. that I just lost it for a second. Give me 1 second. I'll read it to you, Sean. It keeps moving on me. Can I ask how it is approaching the participants? Is it hard to build trust?
Yes, great question, Sasha. And most of the qualitative researchers familiar with this process. One originality of this work is having these great interviewees, because most of the people, especially if they are forced and their status are not stable in the new country, they don't volunteer to share their real experiences, because there are twofold story here. First, when they share this information explicitly, clearly, they may feel like my status is not stable here. I don't hear back from, for example, immigration office now. So it may be a trouble in the future for me. They can think like that. On the other side, some people may think, I have relatives, family in my country, and this regime is still there. I'm safe, okay, but what about them? When I share this information, it may create some trouble for them. So how we pass these, hesitations, concerns? First, they know that I will protect their identity and privacy, because I'm in the same process. I moved here hopefully 1 year before the coup attempt, but I felt the difficulties of this process too. So I'm like them. Me and they are not different. So most of them know that. And protecting their identities, we also created what will be the process. We provided detailed information about protecting their identity, keeping this information, also using, how we will destroy this information about their specific demographics, collecting this data. After analysis, we generated a general, conclusions, and they don't refer to specific person or specific region. So it also protects our interviewees. Great question, Sasha. If you want any follow-up, Erin.
Yeah, so, and also Cihan was the one to do the interviews. They were able to speak in their native language, and also he relied on the organizations that they were already connected to. And so that could kind of vet any concerns they had about, what was the purpose of the study, et cetera. And again, our project initially is to allow individuals to give voice to their experience, and us helping facilitate those opportunities in a way that we hope is safe, and again, through some of that anonymity. And then second, to help with the process for individuals as they migrate in the future, to help kind of figure out ways to minimize the barriers that they encounter, and to create kind of a faster integration process. We had another question in here, and it says, I would like to ask how the culture in the U.S. affected the integration process in the U.S. Was there a positive impact on it? So did the U.S. culture have a positive effect on the integration?
Yeah, maybe I can start and you can complete it. Most of the interviewees are familiar with the process and culture in the United States. Many of them had opportunity to take education or some roles at specific international and national institutions in the United States. So it was not a different place for them. And since they had Western education and Western lifestyles. They did not have a general issue or problem with the United States, and their first impression was good. But there was a difference between these impressions, because coming to the United States as a tourist or for a specific position or role at a specific institutions like NATO is not like being in the life every day. So when they first experienced losing their jobs or previous professionals, previous jobs, they experienced that they are now real in the United States. And they've also seen the real things, real experiences around them. Most of them had never maybe opportunity to talk with different people around the country or specific things, since they are in a, for example, in a headquarters or a specific United Nations mission area. They were talking with the families of these network and not with the everyday people. They are not maybe visiting art markets on Saturdays, or they are not having local visiting, local areas to talk about people. So it was, in terms of that part, it was a real experience, and their real experience also was good.
We have another comment. I would recommend that you conduct a similar study in Germany. We would like to cooperate with your study as a new social enterprise.
That sounds great. We can do that. Absolutely.
Yeah, we will reach out to you. We'll, Sean, you can see in the chat too. We'll make sure to keep track of this. And then we also had some other feedback, and one individual wrote that, thanks for the presentation. It touched a lot to my own immigration journey. We appreciate you sharing that with us.
Thanks so much.
If I may ask a question?
No, please.
Yes.
Thanks for the presentation. This is fabulous work. It's really important, and in the coming years, we'll see, why these studies are actually going to be very impactful on these kinds of forced migration situations. As a forced migrant myself, what I felt after this process that I went through, this experience, first of all, maybe I should just very briefly describe who I am. I was a colonel in the Turkish Army, and all my education was in the United States. I'm a West Point graduate. I am familiar with this place. I came back to United States for my master's studies as well. But after the 2016 events, again, just like many of us, I was out of my job and out of my current status in life. And the logical step was to build my new life here. So even though I was very familiar with the culture and I had an educational background here in the United States, the forced migration that I have experienced changed myself thoroughly. So that's how I felt. I was curious about this. So what I'm trying to get at is in 5 to 7 years, a lot of people who came to the United States and you have studied them, they have succeeded in a tremendous way. And so I think that experience itself changed those people as well. Now, when they look at, their future life and their past life, I think I'm curious if you found, some glimpses of this, how empowered they feel because of being a survivor of such an abrupt change in their lives. How much stronger they feel about themselves, especially for the women. I can say a lot of women that I see around myself, they were, achievers in their previous life, but what they're doing right now is it's just way out of their boundaries that they had for their minds for so long. This forced migration process, this experience tremendously changed them in a very structural, very fundamental way. That's my observation. I was just curious to see if you were able to find similar findings in your study. Thanks again.
Yes, absolutely. We found similar experiences and similar findings, as you said. Most of the interviewees shared these traumas and how hard this process. It's not like just changing a job or a career. It's like changing the life and country. So it's also an emotional process for these people. But it's also interesting to see that they could handle and cope with this process very well. There may be reasons lies behind that, their education, their loyalty to doing something work in a great shape. These may be maybe underlying reasons about that, but they also could accomplish cope with this process very well. I can easily say that. Erin?
Yeah, and I think that what we had mentioned before is some of the instrumental factors initially. What does that look like over time, especially with integration and the cultural integration piece as well. And then also dealing with the trauma and the impact of having family members and friends that are in Turkey and navigating those experiences. But we appreciate you sharing your experience as well. It's really helpful.
Thank you. We still have time. If you have any question, please, you can unmute or share it on chat.
So there's another question. Besides sharing the results of your study and raising awareness, do you have any other work projects such as legislative study to facilitate this transition process?
Yeah, it's also a great question. Actually, it's another project, and we are trying to reach out some professionals, and we have one new board member of the Blue Tulip Human Right Center, and I maybe someone from Blue Tulip can help me about that. I don't remember her name, but she is a professional lawyer and very experienced lawyer, and hopefully we can collaborate in the process of action research with her about this population, because also she's familiar with the Turkish population and she contributed to immigration policies and laws for I believe 3 decades. She's creating these kind of policies. So hopefully we will have a National Homeland Security Conference in July. And in that conference, I will talk about the action plan for the policy change for these individuals and increase their contribution to the new country, to the United States. Hopefully we can discuss about that and talk with these lawyers to have collaboration. And yes, it's the very important part of the project, because as sociologists and political scientists, we found very good, findings, outcomes, but we still need some action plan and some legal support to realize these findings as a social policy or social policy recommendation.
We have another question. High-value immigrants can also enhance the country's culture and society. They bring new ideas, perspectives, and experiences that can broaden the horizons of the local population. Does your study plan to reach out to decision makers here in the U.S.?
Yeah, this is also related to first question. And we already reached out some, decision makers locally. So especially people who have similar concerns about immigration policies. Some delegates, PMs, are very interested in this project. And we are planning to visit some other PMs and sharing them first with our film and project, and having a good conversation with our action plan with our legal counselors.
Yeah, I would like to ask something. Yeah, I live in Germany since 2018, and I saw that considering the integration policy and processes, each individual scene not different. I mean, each individual scene same. The people who has different education backgrounds are not considered. There is no specific way to make this integration easier, and because of that, people find their own solutions, their own ways, and the government or the policies do not support such people who have different levels of education backgrounds. Is that the same in the United States? And how do you see, and did you happen to see anything related with your research in that regard?
For the final part, are you talking about, Serkan, there is no specific difference in Germany and United States, and these people are alone. They are trying to deal with themselves to solve the issues. There is not a legal support. Did I understand correctly?
Actually, in general, I mean with that, when we consider the integration processes and policies, I see that we have only see one aspect of the topic. We do not consider the people who have different education backgrounds and who have different education levels when we talk about the integration policies. Is that the same in the United States? And considering your research, did you happen to see some other good examples or the policies that are implemented already in the United States in that regard for a specific group of people who have different education levels? Because we only see the issue from one perspective, from one angle.
Maybe I can talk about the process here a little bit. Actually, your education, your background is important, especially for having a status here. So, for example, some professionals can easily get EB2 visas in the United States. In terms of that, United States and Canada focus on the contribution of the individuals to the country. So they care about, especially, they don't want to lose highly skilled or highly educated people. They want to provide them some affirmative actions, some affirmative, support. So because of that, in the United States, there are some specific visas like EB2, and it's not very different in Europe. But in our first study, when we compared European countries, Canada, and the United States, 8 countries, we have seen that in Europe, countries have a legal process about the immigrants, and it does not change based on their education level, based on their skill level. They have the same system for all individuals coming from 180 countries. So it's the it's the hard process for the people, especially moving to European countries, because they cannot show themselves easily. They should have the same system. They should spend at least 2 years to learn the language at that level. Before that, they don't have an opportunity. Yes, at first, it's easy process for them. But especially for highly educated or highly skilled people, later it creates more issues and difficulties, because these people do not develop themselves for 2 years and wait and wait and wait. These waiting process is too long for them. But in the United States, it's like, staying in the middle of the ocean. At first, you have a first reaction and a first impact. It's hard, yes, but you have to try, and you have that capital, you have that skill, and you have that education. So in the United States or Canada, I can say at first it's hard process because you don't have a legal support from the country, you don't have any benefit from the country, but later, since United States provides working authorization earlier, you can start to work in any job, and most of the interviewees we had, they were, professors, they were high officers, they were some representatives in the United Nations, NATO. They had to have low-skilled jobs at first, but they did it, and they did not have any concern about that. They were not, ignorant people. So they first experienced low-skilled jobs, but finally they could develop themselves based on the needs of market in the United States. That's the reason why most of them preferred IT jobs. IT jobs are easier for them, making a hard work. For example, most of them worked for 3 months, focused on them, and their spouses supported for the family needs. And in these focus time, they just took courses day and night, they worked, and finally they could completed the courses, and they could combine with their previous careers. So when they, for example, started an IT job or started an cybersecurity job, they did not start from scratch. They did not start from the as a freshman. They started as some of them senior level, cybersecurity expert. Because of their background, they could combine these things together. Erin?
I would add to that, I think there were more barriers that we saw in our first study with European policies. I think if we look at the United States, a lot of the professional skilled areas that many of the migrants were going into had gaps in those fields. So there was a hiring demand. And I think Canada also has a hiring demand, but I think some of the policies in Canada have really prioritized Canadian work experience. So that has made barriers to individuals that are seeking to do a transfer of credentials in Canada, finding out that they're not prioritized in those job applicant pools.
I'm looking for another question. I believe we don't have another question. We have another great speech from Ms. Selin, Senol, Akin, and she will talk about struggling to be a voice for the voiceless while struggling with injustice yourself. Selin, please.
Hi, guys. Can you guys hear me? Wonderful. Okay. I have a prepared speech. I apologize in advance for the paper sounds you will hear as I scroll physically through my sheets. But I want to start off the notes by saying this has been a great presentation. It's been very inspiring, and it's really interesting that I happen to be here. I'm very honored because I am simultaneously a Turkish American myself who immigrated to New York as a young child. I'm also the wife of a still imprisoned naval officer, NATO background naval officer in Turkey, unfortunately. And I also, as if that weren't enough to sort of tie into this topic, I also work currently with asylum applicants. I work at an immigration attorney office in New York. And we are physically, every day, literally seeing the, illegal migrants from El Paso escaping what's going on in Turkey and things like that. So literally, I'm right in the middle of this topic. So I appreciate that opportunity for that reason as well. Also, thank you to Blue Tulip for all their immense efforts, to the UN and the Committee on the Status of Women. I myself have been a member of the UNA Association of New York for over a decade now. Public awareness of various human rights abuses, especially in the country of my birth, Turkey, is dear to my heart and important, I believe, because we need to challenge this false notion that takes precedence, unfortunately, among many Turks, especially in Turkey, that many of us abroad, if we criticize the government there, or the society in general there, there's this assumption that we're somehow backstabbing our country or that we don't love our country, and nothing could be further from the truth. We are trying to ameliorate our country. That I would like to start with saying that as an activist myself here. I grew up in the United States. I received all my education here in a country where many patriots have challenged the various social ills that take place even right here in the United States, as we all know. And they've only done so in order for alleviation to take place. They're not known for doing so because they were traitors or complaining about their country. So no country is without social ills that we as activists from across a variety of backgrounds and professional fields cannot attempt to resolve, or at the very least raise awareness of, in order for others to hopefully be able to eradicate as much as possible. So Turkey cannot be and should not be immune to criticism any more than any other country in the world. So with that being said, I'd like to briefly give you my background with regards to these topics. Like I said, I'm someone who's grown up very active actually among Turkish American civil society organizations here in New York. My mother served 2 terms as the president of an organization called the Turkish Women's League of America, which has supported a weekend school for children growing up here to keep up with their Turkish culture and language. They also provided various cultural events to Turkish women here to keep being social here and taking part in activities, and also take English language classes themselves. I grew up across the UN at the Turkish Embassy building. I always imagined myself working at the UN. I've interned there. I'm not working there, even though I'm a part of their NGOs. I went on to study political science at Stony Brook University, as well as graduate studies at New York University, etc. Alongside my love of politics and activism, I'm also a writer. But I also enjoy teaching. So inspiring the youth has always been my foremost dream. So life took me in this direction of teaching English abroad. Long story short, I eventually taught English in Turkey, where I met my husband, Kemal, who's now unfortunately a politically imprisoned former NATO military officer since July 2016. And yes, in that event, in the chaos that ensued the coup attempt, yes, 200 or so people died, but we have been long ignoring, the world has long been ignoring the tens and maybe even when you count the extended families, hundreds of thousands of Turkish citizens who've been imprisoned, sacked from their jobs, ostracized from society in Turkey, most of whom have never committed anything that could even come close to a definition of crime in any civilized part of the world. So we have forgotten about these families that are also victims. Aside from these 200 or so people who died in the coup attempt. Many have become scapegoats for the current regime, unfortunately, to blame for their own wrongdoings with regards to corruption, just as we recently saw happen in the devastating earthquakes that took place, such as falsely accepted construction and late responses in the aftermath of the quakes. I unfortunately could not attend the recent live talk that was held, I believe, in a correlation with you guys with regards to helping the relief efforts there, but I have been doing my best for the donation efforts as much as I can here in my local community. I truly continue to pray for all the deceased and the families. So I just want to say that as well after the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. I'm from a country, Turkey, where regardless of who's in charge, especially after the upcoming elections later this year, there simply must be room for free speech, like we're attempting here today, for discourse on how to bring everyone in Turkey, regardless of their ethnic, political, religious backgrounds, united in decision-making, avoiding pointing fingers without looking in mirrors at selves. With regards to the topic of migration, in 2017, I returned to New York. So by this point, by now that I went there, even though I grew up here to teach English, and then I got married, etc. In 2017, I returned to New York to live with my family. I needed their support in various ways. I had a child with me, as you can imagine, but I'd also been kicked out of our military housings, our lojman, in Izmir, given only a week with my baby in my hands to pack and relocate. So I became a forced migrant in 2017, following the 2016 events. So I had a unique story as a Turkish American. I came here as a young child at age 7, rather than as a student or as a worker, as many current Turks living here have. So I'm aware now that I was actually lucky to have had that privilege. not having truly witnessed how hard it would be to be an immigrant until one, all the issues I had to face, for example, at the airport in Turkey in 2017 with my baby in my arms, being escorted by the police, not being allowed to board my flight because of her father's wrongful political incarceration, where my US citizenship, yes, I'm a dual citizen, my US citizenship could not even help me. I felt completely helpless for the first time in my life. And being a US citizen didn't help. Being a Turkish citizen, they were not protecting my rights. I just had no rights at that point. As well as the subsequent 4 months or so I had to spend afterwards going to the local police stations there begging for the lifting of this travel ban. Fortuitously, I was able to return, and in 2018, I started teaching English here in New York at an adjunct level at colleges and universities after solidifying my experience at a local language school first, and then moving on to college education for international students, where I met immigrant students from all parts of the world and got to know about the economic hardships they all were facing. During the pandemic, I had the opportunity to run for a small office at the local elections in New York, which I did not win, but it was an interesting experience for me nonetheless. And during that time, we moved to Long Island as a family, where I began to seek in-person work, which landed me, as I began, to the office of locally renowned immigration attorneys that have been helping many immigrants, including many Turkish ones, seeking mostly asylum in the US based on persecutions they face due to their Kurdish, Alevi, LGBT, or other various backgrounds. I currently help them with their applications and declarations still alongside my continued teaching of language. So over the past year or so, especially, I've truly been able to see the various hardships really faced by many immigrants alongside my own growing up here, where I did not face visa issues, for example, luckily, but I did experience economic hardships with my hardworking family, and I was made fun of. I felt left out. I still face the prevalent issue faced by many bicultural citizens, where, for example, we don't ever feel like we fully belong either here in the United States or in Turkey. So a lot of identity issues arise from that. And I've written about this topic in my third book. I'm also an author, my cultural memoir entitled Set Free Your Flow. So that's pretty much where I am at today. I've been writing fiction, writing my memoir, writing poetry to deal with having been left to fend for myself and my now 7-year-old daughter as a what I call politically single mother, using my creativity to heal, to hopefully inspire not only my little girl that being productive can help with mental health issues, post-traumatic stress, especially following traumatic events and sudden life changes like we've gone through, but also inspire young people in general and everyone in general, and to remind them that it's never too late to pursue your dreams, although doing so may not always come in the shape and form that you imagined growing up. So thank you guys for allowing me this opportunity today to speak. And I would encourage anyone who wants to be a voice for the voiceless, those who are afraid of speaking out in their home countries, for they could politically get into trouble simply for voicing dissent against injustice, to do so, to write, to share, and to provide bridges across different cultures, reveling in our commonality as human beings rather than our differences. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for the great speech. Actually, you both shared your personal experience and how you are, struggling for the other voices people. Can you also talk a little bit about your great books? I know Catalyst and I loved it, but maybe some of our audience do not aware of that. Can you talk about them also?
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I wrote The Catalyst. That was my first novel. I wrote it in Norway when I first went to that country because my husband was working at the NATO offices there as a Turkish naval officer. It's semi-autobiographical. It's about a young newlywed woman who is in a new country. So she's sort of like a new immigrant herself, and she's bored and lost, and she finds herself through some mysterious and semi-fantastical events. It is a fiction novel as well, of course. But it also, the book, The Catalyst, which is about a catalyst in people's lives, it also became a catalyst for me in that it inspired me to pursue my dreams, and also it inspired for me to write other books. So I've since published 4 other books, and The Catalyst was intended to be a standalone book, but readers have loved it. I'm very blessed because I sort of published it with small publishers, and now I've been self-publishing it in the recent years. So it became something where they demanded like a continuation. So it does have a sequel called The Penance, and now I'm currently working on its final portion, which is called The Nestling. So it's a trilogy. So basically, it's something that I started, and it's important to me because it's the story of, my husband and I in Norway. And the second one is sort of continues in another direction as this third one as well. It's about my experiences as the wife of a political prisoner. But of course, I don't write that, the characters are not political, imprisoned people's wives per se. There are some instances that I did put real life into the novel, but it is symbolic. It is symbolic. It's about finding yourself. It's about taking the trauma that you lived through and making art out of it. And my poetry is very personal as well. And it's something that my husband and my family do support very much. He has read my books from where he is, unfortunately. So I'm grateful for his support as well. And so, yeah. You can just Google my name. I have a website. You can find my books on Amazon. Just write my name, Senol, Akin, and I hope people enjoy my fiction and poetry. Thank you.
Ms. Selin, here's a question.
Yes, Mr. Saklan, yes. Do you consider teaching young people to write their own stories? Yes. When I teach students of an intermediate level and higher, I do definitely encourage them to write. I always take the lesson plan and sort of incorporate my own thing where I share with them my own writing, and then share topics with them, especially poetry. I think poetry is very healing, and it's easier to write poetry than just stories, of course. But I also have a collection of short stories entitled Earth Up Your Roots that I published last year. Because short stories are just a little bit, they're that length in between a poem and a full-length fiction novel. And so you can actually share your stories symbolically through fictional characters. So yes, young people, if they've been through any kind of trauma. So yes, we've been through the trauma, unfortunately, these political events in Turkey. But any kind of trauma that they've lived through, they can use that trauma symbolically through fictional characters, fictional situations, and enjoy themselves as they write. And also it's cathartic. It's a good relief of sort of mental stress as well. So I would definitely consider that. I have been doing that from students if they're at a certain level. Of course, beginning English students cannot do so yet, but with beginning English students, I do want to sort of gradually start encouraging them to do at least a little bit of poetry. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I believe we don't have any other question, but we have many good reactions in chat, and Erin also looking forward to reading them. Erin, I can share with you the Catalyst. It's a great book. And okay, Serkan also thanking for the presentation and answer. So we are completing our second talk. Now, Reha, if you are ready, we can turn to you and start your talk about online education for Afghan girls. Please.
Hello everyone. I am Reha Tarik Kahya. I am a Navy veteran and I'm calling you from Turkey. Today I will tell you the story of how the internet is being used to give people, especially young women and girls, the joy of life and hope again. The story of how the internet connects not just the people, but also their hearts from the faraway lands. I think all of you are more or less aware of the ordeal that the Afghan people have been going through for the last 50 years. And again, I think you are also aware of the violations of fundamental human rights in this beautiful country since the Taliban came to power for the second time in Afghanistan in August 15, 2021. First of all, let me point out that since the Taliban came to power and established control over the entire country, there has been no conflict in the country anymore, so we can say that the war is over. But there is no fighting. Yes, there is no fighting in Afghanistan, but there is no peace. The biggest humanitarian crisis in the world is currently taking place in Afghanistan. More than half of the 38 million people population is in need of humanitarian assistance. 2 out of 3 children go to bed hungry. And again, yes, there is no fighting in Afghanistan, but there is no security. The security of the Afghan people is now threatened by the armed, mostly uneducated, and brutal Taliban rulers and members. There is no peace in Afghanistan because there is no control. The legal and judicial system has almost completely disappeared. The complaint and control mechanisms are very inadequate. There is no peace because although the Taliban declared a general amnesty on the first day of its takeover and declared that it would not act out of vengeance against the former regime's employees and security officials, there are reports of door-to-door house searches and extrajudicial killings, attacks against former judges, human rights defenders, and journalists. International independent audit and supervision organizations, which are of great importance for uncovering and preventing all these negativities, are also not allowed to perform duties. However, the biggest evil the Taliban has done to their own people is preventing girls from getting an education. Education in Afghanistan is implemented as 6+6. The Taliban first banned girls from participating in the second 6-year term, and then for the existing female students to attend university classes. Finally, the girls were banned from taking university exams. In the face of these bans, some determined families started to give education to their daughters at home, while others sent them to underground and secret schools. But unfortunately, it is not difficult to guess that such families are in the minority because, in addition to the heavy burden of the economic crisis experienced there, it is observed that as a result of the practices of the Taliban that do not leave girls with the opportunity to study and work, child marriages in return for money and forced marriages have increased. I said that the biggest evil that the Taliban did to their own people is to prevent girls from getting education. I would like to explain that with a comparison. I will compare a community to a tree, a great tree with roots, trunk, branches, leaves, and fruits. When you stop watering a tree, it loses its fruit, then its leaves, then its branches. Eventually, it dries up completely and falls over. It's the roots that bring the tree together with water. In this comparison, the water is education. Women, and especially mothers, are the roots that bring the tree together with water. Women can deliver the education they receive to every part of the community tree. Living women without education is like living a tree without water. A society whose women do not receive education is doomed to have the same fate with a tree left without water. The Taliban leaders seem determined to imprison women in their homes and their burqas, as in the years of the Taliban's previous rule. The obstacles to girls' education is an absolute indication of this determination. With other bans that have been put into effect, gradually, women are isolated from the society completely. This is where the internet comes into play. People from different countries of the world lend a helping hand to young women and girls who have been deprived of their right to education. They do that through various organizations they have established over the internet. Today, I am going to tell you about the first of two of these people. The first of these is Angela Dyer, a former Afghan teacher. Currently living in London, Angela is the founder of Parent Online School. When the Taliban took power in 2021, Angela, who is also a mother of 3 children, started asking volunteer teachers from all around the world to join her teaching Afghan girls online. She recruited more than 700 volunteer teachers using social media, and in less than a month, more than 80 psychologists volunteered to alleviate emotional pains of Afghan girls. Today, Harvard Online School has more than 2,200 children and young students, 1,500 of them girls, in 2,000 different classes. They learn over 85 topics from creative writing and psychology to coding and history. They find Harvard Online School through the school's social media accounts. About 60% of the students are in Afghanistan and the rest are refugees in different countries. Angela and all her staff are working without any official funds. They just continue this amazing project of hope with the support, with the funds of ordinary people, like all of us. Their motto, pen instead of gun. Their point, the solution to peace in our country is an educational path that connects Afghan students in a constructive way with each other and for each other. The second example that I want to share with you is Dr. Cihan, who is a teacher from the Hans School in Princeton, New Jersey. He gives virtual English lessons to girls and women aged between 11 and 30 years. Some of them log in from Afghanistan, while others, Afghan refugees, call in from Bangladesh, Pakistan, Iran, Canada, or other temporary locations. The project is the brainchild of Zehra, a 21-year-old Afghan refugee girl. She proposed the idea to home. Today, 30 or so students log in nearly every week. Some of them also mentor younger girls in Afghanistan, and most have a phone buddy in the United States to talk to practice. Those were just two examples among many. Reading the emotional sharings of both the teachers and the students on the internet pages about these online lessons, I saw that not only the students, but also their virtual teachers are very grateful. Students are grateful to have such a chance, such an opportunity. Teachers are grateful to have such an opportunity to help people, especially children. But in the end, remembering some facts make me sad. First of all, only a little fraction of Afghan girls will attend such online lessons. Secondly, those online unofficial lessons will not give the participants officially recognized certificates. They will not be able to become a doctor, a teacher, a pilot, and so on. We can compare the online lessons provided to Afghan girls to watering the trees in a forest, one by one. But actually, what Afghan nation needs is reins. To achieve this goal, international community must start negotiations with the Taliban as soon as possible and put a roadmap on the table, a roadmap in which what exactly is demanded from the Taliban and what they will gain in return is determined precisely. Only in this way can the Taliban leadership be controlled and directed in a way that is for the good of the Afghan people. This is the end of my speech, and I wish all the best for the Afghan people, and thank you for joining me and listening to me, and thank the organizers to let me have that opportunity.
Thanks so much, Reha, for the presentation.
You're welcome.
I'm checking chat for any question. If you have any question, you can unmute yourself or you can just write them on chat. I can read for you. Any comments or questions for our speaker? Okay, for any speakers, do we have any question? I believe we don't have. Thank you so much for our speakers, and big applause for these great contributions and studies. I also want to thank all our participants. If you have any comments, questions, we can share them. Also, I want to share our studies. The first one, I believe the second one is the open source. You can also see them, find them on chat. The second article is open source, and the first article, if you can just shoot an email to me, I can share it with you. Also, I can share our presentation. My email is also on chat now. Please let me know if you need anything or do you want anything from us. Thank you so much to everyone. Have a great day.